Welcome to another Maine SBDC webinar. My name is Kelsey Reardon and I'm with the USM State Office. And we are joined today with Maine SBDC at CEI Business Advisor, Alison Lane. And we're going over some tough love. We're going to talk about business truth. So the title of today's seminar is Can You Handle the Truth? Hard Pills to Swallow for Long-Term Business Growth. And so we are going to go through some challenging conversations today about businesses and what it takes to really move through the world, but this time in general. And so everything we have to say today might not smell like roses, but hopefully it contributes to your business strategies and your long-term business growth. And so take notes as needed, but we are recording today. So I will send out a follow-up email later on this afternoon, probably, maybe early tomorrow, that includes a recording to the session and the slides. So feel free to just listen and take it all in and maybe just jot down questions that you're asking yourself. And we will make sure that you have access to all of the resources that we discuss along the way. If you're not familiar, we are the Maine Small Business Development Centers, and we are here to offer free confidential business advising to the small businesses of Maine. And so all of our services are confidential and they are free, and our webinars are part of that, but we also have an incredible collection of business advisors across the state who will meet with you one-on-one to go over specifics with your business. So if you come away from today with some very specific questions about your business, we highly recommend getting set up with a business advisor to go over those. Alison's contact information and all of our contact information will be in my follow-up email, so you won't have to go searching for that. If you have any questions today, feel free to stick those in the chat below. We have a good group, so we might have the ability to do a Q&A section at the end where people take themselves off mute and we're able to talk a little bit more. Like I said, you'll get that follow-up email this afternoon that will include everything. If you have any questions later on, feel free to respond to that email as well. But otherwise, I will pass it over to Alison to get started.
Thanks, Kelsey. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'll be very honest with you right from the start. This webinar is going to be what you make. It's going to be either probably the most helpful webinar you've watched this year, or it's going to be a complete waste of your time. So hoping that at least a few of you on this webinar go for the former. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you and we'll jump right in. I'm also going to turn my camera off while I'm sharing my screen because my internet can't handle video and share screen at the same time. So perfect. So like I said, this webinar could either be the best thing that's happened to you all year or a waste of your time. So I want to make sure first that you are in the right place, that you know what to expect, because this is not like our normal webinars where we're able to sort of tell you from the start what you're going to learn. So are you in the right place today? So you've built a foundation for your business. And what I mean by this isn't that it's necessarily a stable foundation, but that you're not necessarily right in the startup phase, the transition phase, but you're fairly solid. You've kind of established the basics, and maybe you're finding yourself in a position of sort of a plateau, or perhaps still in a downturn because of the pandemic. You're not looking for a Band-Aid fix. So you've probably already guessed that I'm not going to be here telling you about, the latest grant opportunities to apply for. There's not going to be a quick fix to anything we're going to talk about today, which is why they're called hard truths. You're ready to think longer term. So you understand that the suggestions that I'm going to make today are not things that are going to help you overnight, and they're going to take some patience and commitment before you're going to start to see results. And you have, or you can create the capacity to work on your business and not just in your business. So Understanding that your day-to-day can sometimes be chaotic, but you're able to delegate what's necessary, or at least just mentally separate yourself at least from total business chaos in order to think about your business behind the scenes, the business side of your business as opposed to day-to-day operations. So let's see if you can handle the truth. Welcome to Hard Pills to Swallow for Long-Term Business Growth. As Kelsey said, my name is Alison Lane. I'm a business advisor. I typically work in Penobscot and Piscataquis counties out of our Bangor office. Been with the SBDC and CEI now for about, well, it'll be 3 years in May. And I wanted, because this webinar may ruffle some of your feathers, there may be some things you say, oh, I've heard that before. My business advisor told me that before, or like that seems so obvious. That's not worth my time to think about. So I want to just be clear from the start what my position is. So I have never owned a business during a pandemic like many of you have. I was fortunate enough I owned a restaurant and I sold it about a year before COVID hit. So I do have self-employment business ownership experience, but more importantly, I have that sort of struggle experience. So I went through the whole foundational phase of starting my business, started to run it, struggled for a long time to get some positive cash flow. I hit that plateau point where I had to make some decisions about business growth. So a lot of the problems that I'm going to lay out for you today that you're going to have to decide if it's your problem or if it's something you've already handled are things that I faced before. So I just want to establish that little bit of credibility so you don't just think that I'm someone that sits behind my desk and advises people all day long. So I have been in self-employment shoes, although it was not during a pandemic and likely not in the industry in which you're in. So my purpose today is to help sort of hindsight for me is 2020. So to help use some of those experiences, use what I've talked to clients about over the last 3 years. And I understand that you can't always see the forest through the forest fire. So hopefully today we can help clear away some of that smoke. As Kelsey mentioned, this webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you afterwards. Please keep yourself on mute throughout the presentation, but I do encourage you to submit any questions or even comments in the chat as we go. You'll see some opportunities to be brave and explain what's on your mind, or if I hit a particular pain point, I would love for you to share that in the chat, because it might just give someone else the nudge to admit, oh, hey, that's also one of my problems. And like Kelsey said, I'm hoping, I don't expect to take the full hour today. So if we have time at the end and folks want to share, we want to chat, that's great. So how this is going to work today, we're going to work through a series of problems, and you need to pick out which ones potentially apply to you. Chances are at least one of the, I don't know, 7 or 8 problems that I propose to you today is going to apply to your situation. Write it down on paper, put it in the chat, type it into your computer, whatever. Put it, just notate it, as opposed to just sort of breezing over it. Because I know with these webinars how easy it is after the fact to go right back to your day-to-day busy life and not do what you've decided to do through the course of this presentation. So we're going to discuss each problem, some potential ways to approach it, questions that may need to be answered, steps to take to start to deal with it. And either during or preferably immediately after this webinar, I'm going to challenge you to identify 3 action items related to either one of these problems or maybe multiple problems. So 3 specific things you're going to do in the near-term future to respond to this. And this is the part where you're either you're gonna get what you put into this webinar. So 3 actual things that you can do immediately, and maybe put some deadlines on them too. And if you need help either identifying those action items or deciding where to go next, register for free and confidential advising with us. That's the bread and butter of what we do. That's where we work best. So we'll jump right into the first problem. Are you always busy? Do you have a decent amount of customers and they seem generally happy, but for some reason your bank account is empty? The hard truth of the matter is you may be priced too low. So some potential ways to approach this, if you've decided that this is potentially one of your problems, first realize that you have worth. I see a lot of service-based businesses that struggle with pricing because they know their talent or their skills, And for them to go perform a job for a customer, it seems so simple. You know, it's 30 minutes of their time. It uses a skill that they've perfected over many years, and they have a very hard time understanding the value in the eyes of the customer. So when they write the invoice and they ask the customer to pay them for their work, they feel almost dishonest asking for the customer's money because it was too easy for them. And so it often, undervaluing yourself becomes the cause of having prices that are too low. I just used the example with a client the other day when I had my business. It was so awkward for me that I remember the first iced coffee I sold in my restaurant was like a coffee shop, bakery style. And I remember the first iced coffee I sold to someone that wasn't friend or family member, a complete stranger. And it just felt so strange to take her money in exchange for handing her this coffee, because I made the coffee. I knew what went into it. I knew what the profit margin was. And it was the most bizarre feeling. So I can only imagine for service-based businesses that aren't handing over a physical product, how strange a feeling it is. So when was the last time you actually looked at your prices? When was the last time that you added up the costs behind each item? So the variable costs behind each product, to understand exactly how much does it cost for you to sell one item? What is your profit margin? And chances are, over the past couple of years, with the supply chains what they are, the costs have gone up. When was the last time you thought about your customers and their willingness or ability to pay? Or is your competition, have they changed their prices lately? So if the answer is we've never changed our prices, or we've been open a few years now, we've never evaluated them to make sure that they're still making us a big enough margin, then the answer is it's probably time to consider to do an evaluation. Or if the answer is I haven't touched my prices since pre-COVID, it's definitely time you look at them again. Doesn't necessarily you're going to find that they're too low and that's your problem, but it certainly could be. Has anybody ever complained about your prices? Have any of your customers ever complained about them? And there is this old adage that says, if nobody ever complains about your prices, they're too low. And I kind of believe that. No matter what, you're going to get people that are going to complain about your prices, either because they're outside of your sort of core target market, or just because people are price sensitive. So if nobody's ever complained about it, or I've actually had a lot of clients tell me, nobody's ever complained about my prices. I've actually had a couple of customers tell me I should be charging more. That's a red flag. That's where you should be considering, are you making enough margin off of each item or service sold? And I see fear being a reason that a lot of people don't raise their prices. They're afraid of scaring away their customers. And that's valid. I get it. It's really uncomfortable to have people tell you that your prices are inappropriate. So just ask yourself, why haven't I raised my prices? And if it's just because you're afraid of being rejected, well, that's what we're working on, changing your way of thinking. And again, be familiar with how much money you're making off of each sale, and is it enough to cover all of your other overhead? So if that didn't hit any pain points, on to the next problem. Is the day-to-day running of your business chaotic? Do you have a hard time saying no? And are you trying to please everyone? And this is where you kind of got to be real with yourself and admit, like, okay, I'm not literally trying to please everyone, but you know what? I did accept a job the other day that was a little outside of my scope, and I probably shouldn't have. So you may be offering too many options. So it may be time to sort of evaluate your menu of product or service offerings and decide, am I stretched beyond what I originally planned on doing? And is it causing me sort of growing pains? So maybe operationally, I am a handyman and I'm agreeing to do jobs for people that are either beyond my skill level, or maybe I'm not even certified to do the job, or maybe it's just the sweet elderly couple that I did work for over the weekend asked me to shovel their driveway, and I spent an hour doing that, and I charged them my usual rate, but it messed up my flow for the rest of the day. So learning how to say no and is going to help make sure that you're staying within your core offerings, and it's going to allow you to really satisfy that actual target market. So you don't have to please everyone. You just have to really please the, say, top 20% of your customers. Set some boundaries. So make some decisions, put them down on paper as far as what you will and will not do. And it'll make it easier when a customer calls you up and asks you to do something that's outside of your scope. You'll know, okay, that's on my no list. That's something that I learned the hard way not to do. For me and my business, it was custom cakes. I said yes to a couple of custom cake orders that totally threw off my flow of business. It had me working till like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. The people were outside of my target market because they wanted these really fancy custom cakes that were not part of my core offerings. But I had a hard time saying no. I took the orders, I made the cakes, didn't really satisfy them because it wasn't part of my core offering and I wasn't good enough. And it threw off my regular operations and made it really hard for me to manage the things that my core offerings. So have the confidence in those core offerings to say no when people want to stretch that. So don't try to please everyone, understand where those boundaries are and really focus on satisfying your actual target market. Another potential problem, bit of a different area here. Do you pay your employees fairly, but you still have turnover? Now, I want to say turnover, it's inevitable. So there's nothing you can do. I guess that what I should have put on the slide is you still have turnover that seems unusually high for your industry or unusually high for what you normally see in your business. Are you misallocating your human resource dollars? So spending money in the wrong places and not actually achieving the results that you're hoping for. So consider, are you aligning your compensation with the motivation behind your actual employees? And everybody's motivated a little bit differently. Ask your employees what motivates them. I actually just had a conversation the other day with someone that used to be one of my employees, talking about sort of money. And this person wasn't motivated by money. They wanted to make enough to pay their rent, which I paid them and it was great. But they were more, the reason that they left was because their job description stretched beyond their comfort level. I had them in the front of the house working with customers as opposed to just being in the back of the house dealing with the food prep. So that ultimately led them that they were motivated by being able to do their own thing, not having to deal with the public. So paying that person more wouldn't have changed anything. Obviously, a lot of times people are motivated directly by compensation, but I'm here to sort of broaden the scope and help you realize that if you are already paying them a fair wage, throwing more money at them isn't always going to be the answer. One way to ask employees and kind of glean their motivation, have them describe their perfect workday. So pay attention to the things that come out of their mouth first, because then you know it's what's most important to them. A little bit of a shift here, but obviously part of compensation would be benefits. And if it's something that you've considered, or maybe your employees have mentioned, hey, I'm going to need health insurance. Hey, I'm about to turn 27 and come off my parents' health insurance, or I'm about to finish college. This is something I'm willing to stick around and help you out for longer, but I really need something from you. So there are health insurance stipend programs through the government that you basically set a budget where you pay the employee, say, $200 a month, and the employee turns that money, they go ahead and get their own health insurance. So you don't have to make the decisions as far as what you're offering them, but you're basically just giving them whatever amount of money you've budgeted to be able to give them. It's a conversation for a whole nother day, and I'm not the expert in it, but we can certainly, if you have questions on it, we can dig in a little bit deeper. I also know of another business owner that had, this person's employees didn't need health insurance. So they had, 3 or 4 employees, and they were all either on a spouse's insurance or young enough that they were on their parents or whatever. But what they didn't have was dental or vision coverage. And so this person ended up investing in they offered dental and vision, and they were fairly inexpensive for the employer to get and offer people, but it meant something to the employees. It was sort of an extra bonus. So just things to float around and consider. Now, instead of benefits and compensation, are they motivated by the actual nature of their work? So I know for me, I have a very short attention span, and my job, fortunately, I'm not just sitting in one-on-one meetings every day. I'm able to do things like these webinars. Now, granted, I should say, even if I was sitting in one-on-one meetings every day, every single client I meet with is very different industries. It's why I love this work. And it's what keeps me motivated, because I get to bounce around. I don't have to focus on any one problem for more than an hour or two. So is that an option in your workplace? You know, can people shadow other positions, see if they like other tasks? Can they bounce around? Or are they someone that really appreciates the regular routine and schedule, and therefore you don't want to bounce them around too much? Are they stressed? I mean, this is hopefully a no-brainer, and sometimes you can read on people. Sometimes people show stress, they wear it on their sleeve. Other times it's more beneath the surface. So try to kind of glean that from your employees and figure out if there's a way around that. And I've even sometimes seen employees change to completely different people. You know, maybe their original schedule was an 8 a.m. workday start, and they're late every single day, and they become a problem employee. But a slight shift in their schedule so that they can come in at 9:30 instead, all of a sudden it works with their sleep schedule and they become a model employee just because of that slight shift of their schedule. So lots of little variables that you can consider that don't necessarily have to do with compensation. And I just always laugh when I see this example on the internet, as far as a company misreading employees' needs and trying to offer them something that really doesn't help motivate them at all in this case. Different problem now. Are you having, unlike the initial problem that we addressed with as far as pricing goes, are you having a hard time reaching people? And do you hear a lot of positive feedback? The public seems to love you. They talk about you. They tell you you're great to your face, but they're not investing. They're not saying they love you with their dollar. And if I Google your business name right now, will I have to spend more than 10 seconds looking for the information that I want? And if the answers to those questions is yes, then you may need to devote some time to your marketing. So how do we do this? I would suggest starting out by blocking out a couple hours of your time. And it's going to be, I mean, this is where sort of the hard truth, you have to if you've decided that those problems on that last slide were your problems, you have to prioritize these couple of hours to sort of initiate your marketing plan, so to speak. So I would suggest step one, taking an hour or two to look at your marketing, and we're going to go through some bullet points in a second. I'm going to elaborate what I mean there. Fix the things that are wrong and make a plan for moving forward. And then after that initial sort of front-loaded work, it's only going to be about 30 minutes every week to reevaluate, make some changes if needed, and make the updates that you need to make. So if you can do the sort of the initial chunk of work, you can make it easier on yourself moving forward. So one thing that's really easy, and the reason that I asked a minute ago if I would have to spend more than 10 seconds searching for what I want, is do you have a Google My Business page? So if I go on Google and type in your business's name, does that little box on the right side of the search results pop up and tell me the basics about your business? The Google My Business page shows a few pictures sometimes, you know, your business name, contact information. It shows your hours, your basic offerings. I use Google My Business pages a lot. Most of the time, say I'm searching, I want to go out to eat, and I type in the name of a restaurant that I know of and I'm considering. I don't often even end up on their website or on their social media. I'm usually just looking at their Google My Business page to make sure that they're open and to make sure that they're offering, you know, if I want to eat in, that they're offering dining in. It's really frustrating that a lot of Google My Business pages are not accurate right now because they haven't been updated with COVID related changes. So, and it's free to claim it, and it doesn't take a lot of time to do so. It doesn't take a lot of time to update. So it's just sort of it's a no-brainer must have. And if you don't have one and you don't have a good reason not to have one, you should get one. And I guess when I say if you don't have a good reason not to have one, there isn't one. Even if you are a home-based business, you don't have to put a physical address on there. So that's not a valid excuse not to have one. Social media. So this is a topic for a whole nother webinar. We're not going to dig in too deep today, but I'll just say you don't have to be everywhere. You may think the internet, that's the only way I'm doing marketing right now, and I need to be on every social media channel. But no, I would say choose a channel or two and do it well. Figure out where your customers, where your target market is congregating, and try to meet them there. Oftentimes it's based on the age, for example. So the younger gen, you've got Gen Z on TikTok and Snapchat, and Instagram's a big one now. You've got the baby boomers are all on Facebook. So there's some different sort of age groups. Obviously, depending on what your business is, there may be a need for you to be in different places, but wherever you're going to have a social media presence, do it well and meet the posting schedule where it needs to be. So for example, if you're on Twitter, you're supposed to be posting like 7 times a day or something ridiculous like that. And if you're willing to make that commitment and your customers are on Twitter, go for it. But it's not common. So figure out where your customers are, where you can get the most value, and try to just be in a couple of places, if not just one, and do it well. And that's where your 30 minutes each week is often going to kick in, is that maybe you spend 30 minutes each week making a few posts or scheduling some posts. If you have a website in that initial sort of hour or two, look it over. How is it? When's the last time it was updated? Is it making you look good? So if you have a website that's older than dirt and hasn't been updated in 2 years, is it really helpful? Is it making you look credible, or are people just going on your website and it's actually kind of hurting your credibility? And I've recently heard if your website's not mobile friendly, it's almost not even worth having, because I think like 90% of people are using phones and tablets nowadays to look at websites. So absolutely make sure that your website is mobile friendly, among other things that you should be doing to make sure that your website's in good shape. I think there might actually be an SBDC recent webinar that we did about a checklist as far as website things. I could be wrong. If not, Kelsey's making a note right now to make me do that webinar. Yeah. So anyway, one other thing as far as marketing goes, so forget about the internet for a minute. People are way overstimulated, both online and offline right now. And as important as your business is to you, it's not important to them. Even if people say they love what you're doing and you're so important and they want to support you, chances are they're not thinking about you beyond that conversation. So you have to remind them that you exist many, many times. I've heard recently a statistic that took like 6 or 7 times that someone's business had to come across the radar of a potential customer for that potential customer to remember that they existed and commit. And also, the more people think of you, the more that if their friend comes to them and says they need something that is a need that your business can meet, you want that person to remember your business and mention you. So don't hesitate the amount of time, don't underestimate the amount of times that you need to remind people that you exist, because your business is not as important to others as it is to you. And along with that, get reviews and feedback. It's a good excuse for you to remind people that you exist. And it also lets you know how you're doing. And it can add sort of testimonials or Google star ratings or Facebook ratings that make you look good on the internet. And that can be something you could do. Maybe it's something once a quarter you reach out, you set a goal for yourself to reach out to, say, 5 customers once a quarter and ask for reviews. I know recently it came across our radar at the SBDC that our Google pages we didn't have a lot of reviews, which is awful because we preach this kind of thing all day long to our clients. So I sent an email to a bucket of my clients, and we got flooded with reviews, and it was wonderful. And it was something like, if I had just done that, 6 months ago, or if I did it regularly, quarterly, I'd have been in so much better shape. Whereas now it's just this sort of, we're in good shape now, but it was too late. We waited too long. So next problem, you are paralyzed by a lack of funds, and maybe you've considered all the things that we've talked about already, and they're just not, you're just saying, Alison, I don't have any money. Like, Now, a lot of the suggestions I've already made can be done without money. So that's not necessarily a reason not to do the things if you've identified previous problems, but I understand that sometimes you just need to fill your piggy bank. So the hard truth related to this is we all know that cash doesn't grow on trees, but more deep than that, we get a lot of questions about what grants are available. And the reality of the situation is during COVID, there were some small business grants. There were more than a normal amount of small business grants out there available. And many of you know that even given that, there still weren't a lot, and they were for very specific types of people, very specific purposes. So although there's the stigma put out by the media and politics that there's all this grant money to help small businesses, the reality is that it's not. It's sort of over exaggerated to make, well, we're not going to talk politics, but so the reality is that chances are there probably isn't a grant out there for what money you need. So it forces you to evaluate that need and figure out what kind of situation you can be in if loan funds are the answer. So obviously the first sort of checkbox is beg, borrow, steal. Are there grants? Is there anything you can liquidate in the assets? Are there expenses you can cut? These are things that I'm assuming now. At the beginning of the pandemic, we'd get into meetings with clients and we'd go through sort of these check boxes of making sure that you've cut all the expenses you can. And, is there any interest payments that you can defer? So we checked off sort of all those boxes. I'm assuming at this point in the pandemic, you've already probably checked off these boxes. But if you haven't, obviously making sure that there aren't places where you can cut money easily. So you've come to terms with the fact that you may need to borrow some money. So one question to answer is, what sum of money do you need to get out of this rut? Maybe a sort of range of dollar amounts, but narrow it down a bit and figure out exactly what dollar amount could help get you to the next step. So how do you do that? Because it's easier said than done. If you've worked with an SBDC business advisor a lot, you've heard us use the term financial projections. Basically what this is looking at potential numbers moving forward, figuring out what do the next 6 months of my business look like as far as money I'm assuming is going to be coming in and money that I know is going to have to go out. And what's the deficit at the bottom? Really having that honest look at your numbers and saying, okay, well, we're coming into a slow season, so I'm expecting my sales to drop. Maybe they're down even 10% over what they were last year. So putting those numbers down on paper and then also estimating the costs and figuring out, like I said, at the bottom line, what are the negative numbers? And it helping to establish, again, what sum of money is going to help get you out of this rut. Or maybe, if the answer is, I need $10,000 to buy this piece of equipment that's going to allow you to what? Allow you to introduce another revenue stream, allow you to increase your capacity so that you can make more sales. So, and any bank before they lend you money is going to ask for these projections. So if you're asking for $10,000 to borrow a piece of equipment, they're going to want you to show them the sales numbers moving up because of that purchase. And we've got templates galore to help you put together these projections. So don't be intimidated by doing them, but it's just nice to understand sort of what they actually are. And when should you not borrow money? Well, unfortunately, with survival mode being a big thing over the last couple of years, we've seen these situations a lot. So don't borrow if the terms are bad. Don't borrow from an online money lender. If the interest rate is 10% or more, don't touch it. It's not worth it. And it might even be a scam. Don't borrow to plug the holes. So if you just keep plugging the holes, but you haven't actually solved a problem so that the holes don't reappear in the future based on those financial projections, you're not actually helping move yourself ahead. So if you are borrowing to plug past holes, perhaps you actually need to borrow a little bit more money to invest in that new equipment or to, again, get you out of the rut, not just to sort of plug holes and then you're going to need to borrow more money later. Don't borrow if there's no, same kind of concept, if there's no return on the investment. So again, if it's not going to help you move forward, if it's simply going to dig you out of the rut, but then you're going to end up right back in the rut. And these are all sort of saying the same thing in a very different way, but don't borrow if you don't have a clear path to pay it back. So if you do your financial projections and that additional debt payment can't be supported by additional costs, and it's not going to actually help you move forward, that's not when to borrow. So a different kind of problem. I think we've got two problems left, and they're a little bit more soft. You'll see what I mean. So do you already know what you should be doing? So maybe there have been some things that I've mentioned in this webinar that kind of clicked with you, like, yeah, I know I should probably get on social media, but I'm not comfortable with it, or whatever. Do you struggle to find the motivation or the energy or the time to get that stuff done? Are you too busy to do those things that you've identified, and maybe you've even wrote them down right now to identify that you need to do? Well, you probably already know this, but you may be a procrastinator, or you may be just a very overwhelmed, very busy business owner that has plenty of other things that come first, like serving customers, before you can touch the things we've talked about today. So how do we deal with this? Two things: we drill down and we discipline. Discipline's kind of the obvious. I'm not going to sit here and tell you don't procrastinate, although I think that will come up on the slide, so don't quote me on that. But first, ask yourself why you're not doing the thing that you know you should be doing. And if it's because I'm too busy helping customers, okay, that's fair. Now we need to figure out, okay, well, is it actually more important to be doing the thing than to be helping the customers? Or are there ways that we can shift our time and prioritize these things? Because that's what it's all about. It's all about prioritizing. So it's not that you don't have the time to do it. It's just that you haven't prioritized it as an activity that's worth your limited time. So at some point, when do these behind the scenes things become a priority? When does it become more important to work on your business and in your business? And I think that maybe the reason that you're here today is because you've decided, I do need to take a step back and prioritize some of these things that I've been putting off. So it will help too to come up with what tools work for you. Everybody's different. So these examples aren't, find one that resonates for you. I had a client recently that said deadlines, like, I'm self-employed, nobody is putting any deadlines on. I do great if somebody tells me to do this assignment by this day, but as far as working for myself, I have no discipline to get it done. And so I told this client, I was like, all right, well, do you want me to be your deadline? And they said yes. And they said, email me on Sunday night and ask if I've done this task. And I literally scheduled an email and it went out to them for Sunday night and said, don't forget, you have to finish this task by Monday at 10 a.m. And you know what? They did. They finished it because they felt a responsibility to me. And I don't mean anything to them. I'm not their professor. I'm not their client. I'm not anything to them. I'm just their business advisor. So happy to be that for any of you if you need someone to set a deadline. But it's you have to kind of figure out a way. I find setting an exact date in which you're going to get it done can be helpful. I live and die by my paper calendar. Some people like phone reminders that say, hey, did you do this? Also recently invested in this little timer cube that helps me when I'm getting spacey. I can set it for like 20, 30, or 60 minutes. And I basically tell myself, you're not leaving your desk or you're not switching tasks until that timer goes off. And it actually works. It's this weird little punish. I think it's probably meant for children doing their homework, but it works for me. I'm also a big checklist person. If I can write down that I did it, maybe right now you're making yourself a little checklist. If it feels good to cross it off, write it down, even if it's simple. This is like what my client did the other day. He wanted me to help hold him accountable, but you can also do that just by telling other people you're going to be doing it. So for example, the task my client needed help getting done was updating a website. And I said, well, people are asking you about it. They want to go on the website for more information. I said, why don't you just start telling people when it's going to be ready? I said, what if you tell them, I'm working on updating the website, check back March 1st. Well, now you've just set your own deadline. You've committed to potential customers that you're going to get it done. So tell other people that you're doing it. The Nike logo, so just do it. Sometimes that's all it is just get over it and do it. Or is it something you can delegate, perhaps? If it's something that's not really worth your time, is it worth delegating maybe to family or friends, or investing a little bit of money in hiring someone to help? And the last problem probably is going to resonate in some capacity with all of you. Are you overwhelmed, exhausted, and stressed, especially after that maybe this webinar has hopefully made you aware of a few things that you should be doing? Well, unfortunately, the reality of this is that you have to get off the highway to stop for gas. You can't just keep going, or you're going to burn out and you're not going to be effective for anyone. So the downside is it might set you back. You get off the highway to get for gas. Yes, it's going to set that arrival time on your GPS back by 5 minutes, but it means that you're not calling AAA from the breakdown lane. So you need to recharge, not necessarily rest, not necessarily sleep, but you need to recharge. And I always use the analogy, and you'll see the link at the bottom of the page is a blog I wrote at the end of the year last year. And this was sort of the theme, is that you have to realize at some point that go is not the fastest way to arrive at your destination. And I always use the analogy that when you're lifting weights, you're actually, if you're working out, you're actually tearing the muscle fibers. And what happens is, and I'm not an expert, so please don't quote me on this or say, but the general theme is that your muscle fibers heal during periods of rest. And that's when the muscle growth actually happens, is while you're resting after a workout, not while you're tearing them while you're working out. So if you don't rest, you just keep tearing them, it's going to feel productive because you're going to be tired and things are going to be getting done. But at some point you're going to hit a wall. So recharge. So first it helps with accepting, okay, you know what, I need to do this. This needs to be a priority, admitting it. So realizing that you're not taking a step backwards by stopping. You're actually going to be taking a step forward, because when you're done recharging, you're going to come back more productive than you would have been if you hadn't stopped to rest. And that is that's my dog. He understands the importance of rest and recharge. He's probably actually in that exact position right now downstairs on our couch. So how will you recharge? And it's not always about sleep. I used to think like, okay, well, I'm feeling really burned out. I guess apparently I just need sleep or a day off or something. And that's not always the case. I know for me, sometimes the best way for me to recharge is to tick off all of those little things on my to-do list that I've been putting off. And then it just feels so much better because it only took me a couple minutes to do those things, but now they're off my list. So maybe it's sleep, maybe it's not. You might need to step back from customers. Like I said, you might at some point realize you need to prioritize working on your business and actually, take a break or take some slow down with the customers, maybe close for a day, so to speak, to get certain things done. Realize that that revenue that you're going to lose in a day of closing, it's going to be more than made up for when you come back stronger. And figure out why not, why, if you've decided you need to rest and maybe you've even come up with something you should be doing, why aren't you doing it? It all comes back to kind of holding yourself accountable and figuring out, is it because I'm afraid of disappointing my customers? Is it because I don't actually believe that rest is going to help? So why are you not doing it? And so finally, which of these truths are you going to explore? Circle one or all or a couple. And what are those 3 action items? And I encourage you to just write them down, maybe set a deadline. If you're crazy busy after you hop off this webinar at 3 o'clock and you don't have time, just, okay, put it in your calendar for later in the week or next month or whatever. So whenever you might have time to start tackling those action items, be real with yourself about a deadline. And of course, if you need help, this is how to reach us. Happy to do one-on-one advising with any of you. And that is all I have. So let me pull up the chat and stop my screen. And hopefully reload my video without running out of bandwidth. All right, so let me I haven't looked at the chat. I saw some comments come up, but I purposely avoided it.
Yeah, we've had some great comments. No questions yet. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to plug them in the chat. But I feel like I identified very much with Paul, who said, I was going to start a support group for procrastinators, but I never got around to it. If that's not the story of my life, I don't know what is. And so also, and I apologize for pronouncing your name wrong, but Margin mentioned that they use a timer that grows trees. So I imagine that's like a digital platform. Feel free to stick that in the chat if there's a link to that. That would be great. And Flora, cool. I thought it was interesting. Alison mentioned quite a few people use their business advisor as that accountability within their business. And so it really, we're happy to check in, send friendly reminders. But if you really just need somebody to check in, that is an easy way for the SBDC, an easy way for us at the SBDC to support you. Finally got that out. I will also mention that several of the topics that came up earlier, we do have recent webinars, which are all recorded on our YouTube channel. A lot of the social media techniques, definitely Google My Business, which should be free. It's very inexpensive. And then also we have a new digital e-learning platform. So we have a lot of e-courses, and we have a digital marketing course. We have hiring, but it's more based on like hiring your first employee, but it does hit on some of those perks. So there's definitely ways for you to further explore a lot of these topics all over our website currently. And I'll include all those links in my follow-up email. But I don't see any questions. So it seems like Alison did such a great job that everyone just wrote down their ideas and they're ready to go. We have another fun fact. The Nike logo was purchased from a design student, $35. So charge what you are worth, people. That is a great story. Yeah.
That's funny. It's a great example of that person. All they had to do was draw that little swoosh, and look at how much value there is, like, continually. It's amazing.
Exactly. And there is a pricing your products and service e-course. So that does talk a little bit about how you determine those numbers and also how you can change those numbers later on as needed. But yeah, Shannon says thank you. I say thank you. Alison, wonderful as always. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that it wasn't too tough, but it inspired you. Everyone's saying thank you. Lots of action items to go on. So good. We're so glad to hear that this was helpful. I'll send out that follow-up email later on. Please reach out if you have any questions at all moving forward. But yes, thank you all so much for joining.